Welcome to Workshop D of the 2025 Virtual Conference, Engineering Cohesive Communities, Social Integration of Foreign-Born Americans, hosted by the Institute on Immigrant Integration, Research and Policy at the Rockefeller Institute of Government, State University of New York. My name is Adriana Mintarsi, one of the 2025 Immigrant Integration Fellows, and I'm honored to be moderating today's session. It's a privilege to be part of this community of scholars and practitioners committed to advancing inclusive policies and practices that support immigrant communities across the country. Today's session focuses on a timely and urgent topic: civic engagement and engineering community cohesion. We'll explore how we can address social isolation, political alienation, and fragmentation, while promoting models that truly center community voice, revitalization, and long-term integration. We have a remarkable panel today, each of whom brings deep insight and practical experience. We have four speakers today. The first one is Tim Doherty from West Hill Refuge Welcome Center Experience. Presenting West Hill Refuge Welcome Center Experience, Resettlement and Revitalization of a Blighted Urban Neighborhood. Then the second one, we have David Monda, presenting Impact of Mass Deportation on Senegalese Entrepreneur Immigrants in Harlem's Little Senegal. The third speaker, we have Aoyung Kim, presenting From Community Need to Economic Integration. And last but not least, we have the fourth speaker, Maria Figueroa, an industry of immigrants in a city of immigrants, the case of app-based delivery workers in New York City. First of all, I'd like to apologize if I did not pronounce your names correctly. And each presenter, which speak for about 8 minutes.
So, sorry, you have another speaker. That's me, Robert Smith.
Okay, wait a second. Oh, we have, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Robert Smith. Okay, and wait a second. I apologize for that. Each presenter will speak for around 8 minutes. If you are using slides, feel free to share your screen directly. And for the audience, if you have questions, please submit your questions in the chat during the presentations. I will collect them and bring them into the Q&A discussion following the final speaker. And as we begin, I invite you to reflect on questions such as, how do we foster civic participation when trust in institution is low? How can revitalization efforts bring communities together rather than drive them apart? And how do we ensure immigrant voices are present in shaping the policies that impact their lives? With that, let's begin. And I will let Tim, the first presenter, to have the floor.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Don't have a slideshow, but I could share, I think, just some images, and then I'd have to do this clunkily. It's not showing. There it is. Won't stay. Is this anything showing here? Yeah, here we go. Okay.
Not, yeah, now, yes.
This is just why is that there? That's there. It wants to. Anyway, this is just a kind of want to set the tone here, because what got me started here, this is me in about 2007 or 8, looking at waypoints on water bottles, doing humanitarian work in the Sonora and Arizona desert. So it's got me involved with, immigration, global economy, people dying mostly because policies, bad policies. And we still haven't straightened it out. People are still coming. It's even more, and it's more global. So here we are. I like that Ray Kozlowski's here, because we talked, and the whole thing with the refugees coming into town. I predict probably around 2011 or 12, because yeah, global economic issue, yeah, the whole
Um, I think Tim is frozen, Adriana.
Yeah, Tim is frozen right now. Are you still there, Tim? Do we want to give Tim a few seconds, or I probably should go to the next speaker first and then go back to Tim
Yeah.
until he gets his better connection?
Yes, I think we should go to another speaker.
Okay, got it. All right. So I'm sorry for the change of order, everyone, since Tim seems to have a issue with his internet connection. I would like to turn the floor to the second presenter, David Monda, presenting impact of mass deportation on Senegalese entrepreneur immigrants in Harlem's Little Senegal. So David, the floor is yours. And we will go back to Tim if he's back here. Thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Adriana. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So my video has been disabled. So if you'd like, you can turn that on for me. I'll go ahead and start. So just for those who are not familiar with New York City and Little Senegal, Little Senegal is an area, a part of New York City that's located in Harlem, which is above the area between 116th Street to the south, and probably all the way up to 125th to the north, and also between Lexington Avenue on the east and all the way down west to about Malcolm X Boulevard. And a bit of history around this area. The Senegalese, this is a new immigrant population. They started to come to the US, particularly in the early 70s, and to a larger degree in the early 80s, based on a range of push and pull factors. I think one of the push factors was political challenges in the source country, which is Senegal in West Africa. Another element was economic deprivation and challenges of the 80s with structural adjustment in that part of the world. And a third one was immigration being tightened in, as we know in Europe, particularly France, where a lot of Senegalese immigrants would go. France is, a traditional colonial master of Senegal. So this was there's a cultural, political, and economic strong ties with France. And when Europe started closing down, particularly in the 80s, then the US became an alternative and a very attractive avenue. And the other last element is geographically. New York City is the closest point to West Africa from the East Coast. So, it was very convenient then for Senegalese immigrants, instead of trying to get into Europe, to try and come into the US as an alternate space. And so hopefully that gives us, a general background on the area. And why Harlem? Harlem is, for a range of factors, it's in New York City. It's economically convenient, at least in terms of pricing. At that time of the history of the city, New York was going through a terrible recession. Harlem was one of the worst parts of the city to live in. So these immigrants came in and really transformed the neighborhood with some incredible ingenuity, entrepreneurship. They pulled money together and were able to create social capital, use their social capital networks to create microfinancing and to start up businesses and support each other in that process. And it's interesting to think about how these communities were able to do this in the 80s and even to the present day as their population has continued to increase. As you could imagine, a new immigrant to the US, you probably don't have the credit, so you can't go to a formal banking institution because you've not built up your credit. And also, there's a lot of challenges with immigration paperwork for a lot of new immigrants because of the conditions under which they come. A lot of them might end up having to live in the shadows. So for a lot of these Senegalese communities, really, Harlem was a safe space, not only because there was a large pool of co-ethnics and family networks that had been established within Harlem, but also because of the mosque networks and what we call the marabouts. The marabouts are like imams in these different mosques. So if a new immigrant came and they didn't know anywhere in the city, the first thing they would look for in Harlem would be the mosque, which is on Malcolm X Boulevard, between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And they would, they'd go to the imam and say, hey, I need a place to sleep. I need to get a job. Can you find someone who can, provide me some training, and so on and so forth. I think in terms of the mass deportation, a lot of this community has really been devastated by not only the uncertainty around community policing, around Mayor Adams working with the Trump administration in terms of deporting of immigrants. I think that's been a huge problem for members of this Senegalese community. There have been reports of members of the community being taken out of school, being picked off of the streets, and ending up in removal proceedings. The other element is also that a lot of Senegalese immigrants are Wolof speakers, which is the African language in Senegal that a lot of them speak. And a lot of them are French speakers. So language is also a major challenge in terms of this community. So then thinking about ways to integrate and make this community feel empowered and integrated, I think a lot of work has to be focused around facilitating regularization of these immigrants, creating and enabling them to have a pathway through which they can regularize their documents. And that's particularly becoming a challenge for NGOs working in Harlem with migration authorities, which in many cases are very hostile, because ICE seems, hell-bent on a mission to remove a lot of immigrants, and we have a very xenophobic energy around migrants right now. So there's a lot of these very difficult political subjectivities around migration. Three more elements that I'll go over very quickly is the second element of supporting these immigrants is strengthening inclusion, allowing them to enter the labor market and financial services. So thinking about ways through which their social capital networks and this community microfinancing and informality that they have in terms of lending each other money, how that can be formalized within either credit unions or community banking so that these individuals can actually get easier access to credit. A third one would be promoting the development of language training programs, and not only to enable them to speak English or allow them opportunities to speak English, but also meeting them at their own, language level, right? So providing wall of service or translation facilities and also French speaking facilities. And then two others here, developing informational fairs for migrants. I think that's something that many community organizations are working on here in Harlem. But it becomes really difficult because, a lot of members of the Senegalese community are very terrified about coming out in public. They're scared of police because they're not sure whether they'll be profiled and might end up being deported. So you find a lot of community members, particularly those without papers or whose asylum paperwork has been rejected. A lot of them will just live in the shadows. I think lastly is really improving this air around discouraging xenophobia and discrimination. And this, I think, will be an ongoing challenge for a lot of the community organizations in Harlem, particularly given some of the challenges we have with the xenophobic rhetoric from Washington. So my time ends there, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for sharing the civic engagement that your project has done with the local city government. And now I would like to go back to Tim. Are you here, Tim? And you have a better internet connection?
Yes, and I'll
Yes.
mute too.
Okay, so I
I'm sorry,
will back to you now.
I'm glad to go follow David now because that's the reason I have good internet, good connection, but it's 110 degrees out in my computer over here. And I'm at the border now because we don't have enough. I've got good attorney support here, and one of the big impact on our community, our neighborhood right now is threats of ICE and Homeland Security agents coming around. So we're all trying to figure out how we can keep so-called elderly people keeping their paperwork going and keeping their families in their house, and if they aren't, then we scramble to help the kids and the parent, the mom. It's a little worse than COVID was, but we a lot worse. But we started getting the houses. We had houses going vacant. This is a neighborhood where housing is affordable. So where we have refugees selling in, they end up going where they can afford, and it's often poor neighborhoods. So I just started combining the idea of if I'm trying to work with some refugees and immigrants in the neighborhood, or the refugees coming in, if they were living close by, I could with some generate some resources of people coming in, and we could concentrate. So that's part of the integrative effort we have. And then as people are in there, and we buy a house or two a year and renovate them, or work with a landlord who's struggling to get stable tenants, and we lease from them. And within 4 or 5 years of this, we have a block. Not that it'll mean a lot to you, but I can share this. I can share. I've done because the pictures have 1,000 words here. Okay, now go. Okay, so this is our area here in the red box. We have a elementary school to the west. The main strip of Central Avenue. We've got a very, very active international business presence with restaurants and halal stores, a mosque even. But you go further to the east, the north, and you're gonna have this neighborhood that began as immigrants back when we were all railroad workers in the area, and since then with the shifts that we all know of with inner cities, white flight we'll call it, or redlining, and then resources increasingly going to the suburbs, you end up with a lot of people without a lot of resources. Food deserts with all these little words we use. And then in comes all these folks, and we like to say, they're going to help us with our economies and our neighborhoods. But it's like, yeah, how? You just throw people in there, and it's not likely going to happen on its own. So I just thought, given that my experience with looking at the global economy, my own educational background, understanding, things that are behind what we think about with assimilation and toleration. I'm familiar with Martin Marty's book we did a while ago, Diversity in America, E Pluribus Unum, where he talks about a totalism versus tribalist approach, and he ends up going for an association of one. So someone earlier we've all been talking about this so far today. So we've Cortez. Yeah, I was sitting down with Cortez. I'd like to show him these. We've gotten some good support with New York Council on the Arts. We're working with local artists to come in, usually working with the kids, but the moms have been. It's been really key to get the moms out. Most of our families are mothers with single moms with kids, and Ray had mentioned that we've had a couple. Dina mentioned the 3-month mandate that people are covered by the help with the resettlement agencies. It's like it's just not enough. It's a bit cruel, honestly, but even getting some of the women out to take English classes, given a cultural background they have, is a long slog. You're not gonna get them out for the most part that quickly. But they cook like there's no end. So we have them sell in and get recipes out there and teach each other how to cook. And it's just a neighborhood. I'm on this block because my grandparents and my aunts and uncles all grew up here, and the house is they need a lot of work. They got to maintain them, and people just have to work together. And so these folks own this neighborhood. I don't call them clients; I call them agents. They're all friends. They grew up with my nieces and nephews. Sudanese, Afghans, a lot of Burmese, Myanmar folks. We've had houses go down, and we get vacant lots, and we've gotten 3 or 4 community gardens out of them. Speaking to we have a very high. The high school kids, all the kids that graduated are going to college. This year we've got some middle school guys. We're celebrating them, but for the most part, we're inadvertently gentrifying, unfortunately, in a way. It looks at it anyways. We have rents that people can afford, which means they have enough money to pay for food and cars and things you need if you're going to try to live here. So they do well, but then the surrounding people get sometimes even resentful. They seem to think these guys are getting special privileges. And so we've gotten ourselves, we're right in the middle of all the stuff we read about urban violence and youth not knowing how to resolve things because the adults don't know how to resolve things. We've gotten into great restorative justice programming with some real experts on that locally. Been working on a long time. Get kids working on cleaning the streets, and we'll have Eids. Soccer program we got locally. We got a park nearby. We worked with the Y for a couple of years, but things come and go. Let's see. So housing in English, we provide English classes in this center that we bought, a building that it was commercial printer for, a couple generations of my family. And then just the whole neighborhood had slowly gone down to where we couldn't really sustain any kind of business there. So I ended up buying it almost just so it didn't become something else, not helpful to the neighborhood. And these guys are proud, and all these kids, we've been there for 10 years, and families have grown up here. We've been at this now for over 10 years, and all these kids in these pictures really well. And they're resilient, but again, you throw that word around, it's like, but they're not. You can't do the impossible, and if you give them a little, boost, and they're going to help us do what we can't do by ourselves, which is try to bring a neighborhood back from blight. Because once it hits that point, returning it to a functioning neighborhood is, when it's gone down to drugs, and people are stealing the copper out of their own house before they walk away from it. Crazy things you can't imagine. Uh, and I have a doctorate degree. I have a big academic background. So you can't put all the pieces together. You can't maintain the energy unless you're in there and you have the right perspective. And where I'm going with that partly is I had a quote from Elie Wiesel, who I read early on when I was working here back in the border in the 2000s. He says, you can't pity a refugee. Don't pity refugees or immigrants, because they carry the divine, that they have the refuge of God in them. I don't mean to get religious here, but it is true. When folks show up, they are on fire and they are ready to go, and it's really exciting to work with them.
Sorry
But
to
they
interrupt.
gotta have some stuff to work with. So
Sorry to
that's
interrupt him.
positive. It's
We
okay. Okay.
minute left for you. Sorry. Thank you.
It's a good ending. No, fine.
Oh, you're done?
I thought you were telling me I was done.
Yeah, you could conclude the presentation in 1 minute if you can.
Okay. 1 minute. That's a lot of time. Oh, engineering. I have a hard time with that word, but I do like experiment. Engineering, because I'm here, people think I'm engineering things, but we do, tried to get a few, make sure we have enough people, Africans, and to be able to work with each other. And so Cortez is right. Assimilation, you got to drive on the right side of the road. You can't put certain things down the drain. Yeah, assimilation. Toleration, yes, we can go with that. But if you start beating your wife, because that's what you do back at home, you can't do that. So it's all this dialogue. It's deep stuff. But if people are just doing it on their own, without, the larger community engaged with them, it doesn't happen. People just start hunkering down together for support. So what we've had a lot, we work with the various ethnic groups, and now the Spanish-speaking folks have been really awesome, because they, in the past few years, been able to come out of the shadows, and they are, in a lot of ways, closer to American culture than someone from Kabul or the hill countries of Burma. So they have really kind of been able to come out, and they get everybody else out. Had some great experiences with kids from a lot of different places. The parents struggle. The kids just go ahead and they move on, and they keep us parents on our toes. But it works if you get in there. And I know as academics, and I like to read and I like to write, but it's really got to be more hands-on, real Dewey like, and I don't know. It's a great opportunity. Anybody who's bored these days is not paying attention, that's for sure. But this anti-immigration, I
Um,
think,
but your
yeah,
time is up. I
it's
need
up.
to.
I knew I
Yes.
could use that easy.
I'm
Okay,
so sorry. I'm
no,
so
it's
sorry.
no problem. The
Three
best I
more
could do.
presenters. So I think to
Unshare.
make yeah, to make sure that the other three presenters still have enough time to present,
Yeah, of
I'll
course.
turn in this to the next presenter. You
Okay.
have 8 minutes to present your paper. And for the audience, I would like to remind you, we welcome your questions. Please put the questions in the chat, and we will collect the questions. And maybe if we don't have time to have your questions answered during the workshop, we would make sure that the presenters will get the questions and reach out to you to answer your questions. All right. So the next presenter for this workshop is Ah Yoon Kim. And I would like to turn this to Ayung Kim. Hopefully, I did not pronounce your name in a wrong way.
It's Ayang, very close.
Ayang.
Thank you.
Ayang.
Thank you, Adriana.
Ayang. Okay, so Ayang, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adriana and Guillermo and Dr. Refugee. It's an honor to be part of this panel to discuss community cohesion and immigrant integration. I feel like my take on this panel and what we're about to share is a little different from others. We're talking more about economic integration and how that will lead to civic engagement. So, a little bit about the Asian American Federation before I jump in. We are a nonprofit that based in New York City. We work with 70 plus member partner organizations in New York City, as well as some parts of upstate New York, through research, advocacy, and policy on topics such as economic empowerment, mental health, and seniors. And today I will be talking about one of our flagship special initiatives, Thriving in Online Market Space program, also known as TOMS. This is our special initiative to answer to community needs and work towards economic integration. So to frame the problem the way I see it, because I work with small businesses, I want to mention that we often see or talk about integration as a policy or like a final destination that we want to get to as a society, like a social outcome. But honestly, on the ground, I see it more as a process. And this is a process that is shaped more by access, recognition, and community building, right? So there has to be points of where individuals and community members come together and learn about each other, but also a time and a place to celebrate what we are all each contributing to our community, both in economic terms and social integration wise, right? And too often, I feel like that process is interrupted before it even starts. And this is unfortunately the case, especially so for the working class immigrant community, who are often workers and owners of small businesses. So this is what we see in New York, right? Immigrant neighborhoods are central to New York City's economy. They power commercial corridors, they drive food culture beyond their immediate community members, and they provide goods and services indiscriminately to the entire city. Yet, when it comes to policy conversations and implementation of integration programs, these businesses and our communities are kind of seen as a separate entity from the broader economy. You know, people are asking like, Ayan, what is your community needs? What is your business need, right? But honestly, they're not on the margins. They're part of the economy. But at the same time, when these businesses are expected to operate in a marketplace that runs on digital infrastructure, tools like Google Maps, Apple Business, Uber Eats, and Yelp, many of these platforms are something that you cannot do without as a business owner, but also it's inaccessible to immigrant businesses who face barriers with digital literacy, English language issues, or fear of engaging with systems or corporations that they don't trust. So when we see economic exclusion that feeds more into barriers of social integration, we think it's not random, but it's more of a structural issue that is built into the design of our economy today. So what the traditional workforce programs are missing right now is that these structural gaps are also showing up in workforce development, right? Let me give you an example from a program that we worked on in the past. A few years ago, the Asian American Federation worked to promote and recruit for the construction site safety training program. This is a new requirement for all large construction site workers that they have to go through a new certification training and then earn the certificate to be able to legally work on these sites. So the Asian American Federation helped hundreds of Chinese-speaking residents get certified in the required safety course. We had over 300 members sign up and over 200 community members certified. But at the end of the training, there was no help. There was no plan to help trainees find job placement. The city's main partner was not set up or asked to set up support employees for job placement. There was no language assistance, and people who went through months of training were kind of left out in the open. In fact, Chinese construction companies came to us asking my staff to, like help matching with graduates, which we did as much as possible. But this was a painful learning moment where we learned that the lack of integration and the barrier to successful job placement was not a problem within our communities, but it was a problem that was built into the way that our policies address workforce development. We also quickly learned that the lack of direct pipeline to job placement was not a unique problem in the CSSD program. A lot of federations, partners, and community organizations also provide a diverse services and workforce development programs, and they share that they see the same problem. Their clients and constituents go through weeks and months of training and resume writing, but there is no job at the end of the day for them to actually match people up to. And there is almost no in-language, culturally appropriate services where individuals can actually, get consultation in their language and build a good rapport with the job placement advisors. So in order to address this issue, we try to be a little creative and do what we do best, which is for my team to work with the small business owners. We designed a new model called the TOMS, or the Thriving on Online Market Space program. But we started by listening to immigrant-owned businesses in Queens, like Stella, you see here on the top right corner, who told us that she understands, especially after COVID, there really is no possibility that she can survive as a business owner who has been she has been a beauty salon owner for over 25 years now in downtown Flushing. But over the pandemic, she's lost a lot of her regular clients within the Korean community. She's also a senior who doesn't know how to check her own email. In fact, I set up her email 5 years ago personally, and I still have to help her out how to check email sometimes. But the point is that she understands that if she doesn't have online presence for her business, she eventually just has to close because there's not enough word of mouth in the Korean community that's going to sustain her business, as opposed to like maybe 10 years ago. She later became a victim of fraud, actually, because when she realized that she really has to get online, this gentleman happened to come to her business and said that he wants to help her. So for free, he's going to set up all this online systems for her to reach non-Korean members and help people make appointments with her. Basically, he was talking about Google Business Profile, which is actually already free for people to use. But she gave him all the information she had and all the access to her email and everything that I had set up for her before. And he set up the Google Business Profile for her, which did lead to new promotion and new clientele outside the Korean community. But as soon as she started seeing new business, he demanded money. In fact, he demanded over $4,000 in cash, which she could not pay at the time. And when she refused, he kind of sabotaged the whole profile, saying that I'm not going to help you. This is not free. You're very ungrateful. And so he put up all this wrong information about business hours, address, and phone number. So she even lost her regular clients who she would have had if she didn't have this issue. What we learned from this, right, is that there was a dire need for reliable community education and a support program to help immigrant businesses. The reason Stella fell as a victim, she's a very smart person, and she's been a very successful business person for the last 20 years, the first 20 years. But the reason she felt susceptible to the scam was because of the desperation that she felt that her business is going to tank because of the market change. Today, 70% of consumers on the ground will only go to businesses, visit businesses that they see online, or, unless you know exactly what you want at the moment, you will Google things like, or look into your map applications to see things like, barber near me or fried chicken near me, right? So that kind of online exposure at the very basic level is really important. So this is what the Federation did, right? How we work is that, first of all, we partner with the trusted community members, recruit community members through trusted organizations that are already serving these individuals as a social service program or another workforce development program that they have. We take these individuals and give them in-language training to become basic, to learn how to do basic online presence establishment for small businesses and how to talk about that work. And then To some graduates of the program, we will offer paid job opportunities where they can later go on to engage with immigrant businesses that speak their language and or individuals that they know in their community that might need the services. By making sure that we have this a paid job opportunity and then using the graduates of the, sorry, am I running out of time as well? Okay.
Yes. Could you conclude?
Okay, I'll try to finish up in 1 minute. That's okay. The best part of this program was that we were able to give individuals the paid job opportunity where people who didn't have the soft skills to venture out into this new career transition were given the opportunity to actually learn and hone soft skills as well that are critical for the successful career transition. People who are victims of, survivors of domestic violence or seniors who wanted to use their capacity but wanted like a little more help with like being comfortable with digital economy. Individuals who actually completed the technical training who may not be ready to venture into like corporate setting for like marketing kind of job career transition were able to have this opportunity to practice with us in the safe place. So just last thing I wanted to show is that the best success that we've seen for the businesses themselves is also really significant, where we see like a business like Jeonju Restaurant, which is in Murray Hill. Within 1 month, we saw her Google profile interaction going up by 88.3%, and menu views from members of the public that are not her customers, because her regular customers are all Korean seniors who don't use Google Maps, that increased by 107%. We also saw that there were a lot more reviews coming in. And today, Sophia, the owner of Jeonju Restaurant, tells us that her business has a lot of non-Korean residents and consumers coming in that she did not have access to. So sorry, I didn't get into the civic engagement part. I would love to talk about that in the question and answer part if we have time. But yeah, all in all, we are very happy to share that this project was able to bring in both community members and small business owners who have been kind of cut away from the mainstream economy to become more integrated and gain the confidence to be participating members of our civic community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayang. I apologize once again for all the presenters. We don't really have that much time, so we need to kind of cut short your presentation. I apologize for the inconvenience. And now we are going to have the fourth speaker, Maria Figueroa. I hope that I did not pronounce your name in the wrong way.
No, it's good. So thank you. I just need my camera to be enabled.
Okay, give me a moment. Start
Yeah.
and I your camera while you're starting the presentation.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna go directly to share my screen. Because I know we're running out of time. So let me do that. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm gonna put it in mode. Okay, so yeah, my presentation is about the experience of app-based delivery workers in New York City. And I try to frame the presentation in a way that I address the main guiding questions that the conveners provided. And so I will focus on the strategies that were used to integrate and advance economically this workforce that became an essential workforce in New York City. So what I like to do is start with the socioeconomic context and policy context for this experience and providing a profile of New York City immigrant population and what the current policy framework is to protect immigrant workers. And secondly, and most importantly, focus on the case of the New York City Los Deliveristas Unidos, which is an affiliate or part of the Worker Justice Project. I'll describe all this much more. First, just an overview of New York City as a city of immigrants, with a rich history of welcoming immigrants over the centuries. And so today we have 3 million people in New York City that are immigrants and comprising 40% of the total city population. So, we have 8.3 million people in New York City, of which 5.2 are native born and 3.1 are foreign born. So what about the racial and ethnic composition? Well, the largest group is the Hispanic or Latino population, which is almost 32% of all foreign-born in New York City, followed by Asians, which comprise almost 28%, others 20%, white alone 18.3%, Black or African origin 18%, and Pacific Islander 0.1%. So then we have the composition of the workforce by nativity. And here we can see where the immigrant workers concentrate. And as you can see here, the construction industry is one of the industries in which we have the largest immigrant. I'm sorry. I'm saying it wrong completely. The largest, is the largest concentration of foreign-born workers. So, of all the employed population in New York City, about 43% are immigrants. So that's a very, very significant percent. Let's see what is the framework, the policy framework that we have in place to protect immigrants in New York City. Well, we have the so-called sanctuary cities, sanctuary law. And so they are essentially a set of policies that limit the way in which the local government can collaborate or cooperate with federal authorities, especially the immigration authorities. And so the first, sanctuary policy was instituted in 1989. And again, is mainly that, it mainly protected the information of immigrant workers from being shared with federal authorities. And following to that, we have more cities in more local laws enacted. Again, limiting cooperation with ICE. And one example is the 2014, barring the detainer, the so-called detainer request from ICE, and 7 cases in which there was, an immigrant person committed a very serious crime. And so only in those cases, the NYPD, the New York Police Department, would then, share information about this individual or cooperate with ICE for his or her deportation. And in 2018, the city government even reinforced these laws. What about the state? Well, yeah, we do have some protections at the state level. For instance, prohibiting arrests in courthouses and government facilities. State government facilities. But the problem here is that there is a gap in the sense that local governments are not required by this law to have these protections for immigrant workers. So so for that reason, there is a bill that has been introduced for about 5 years now, is the New York for All Act, but it hasn't been passed yet. So we also have the so-called green light law, which enables immigrants to obtain a driver's license regardless of their immigration status. And of course, the federal government recently, in February, filed a lawsuit against New York over this law. And okay, so let's go into the Liberistas experience. The key actors in my case, in the case that I'm presenting, are a community-based worker organization, which is called the Worker Justice Project, and they formed Los Deliberistas Unidos, Delivery Workers United. And we have natural worker networks that are based on family ties and social networks that were transplanted from the countries of origin by immigrant communities. And the local government, of course, including the city council, the mayor's office, and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, DCWP, which is the agency that is in charge of implementing the improvements that this workforce was able to obtain through their advocacy efforts. And of course, we have the digital platforms, which are the industry players, and they are well-known entities, and like I'm sure many of you have ordered food through digital platforms like Uber Eats or DoorDash and Grubhub. So let's have let's see a background of the workforce. There are more than 61,000 app-based food delivery workers in New York City. They are classified as independent contractors. That is actually important because as independent contractors, all you need to engage in economic activity is an IT number, is the taxes, the independent or employer identification number that the IRS issues. So all you need is that. You don't need a social security number. Thanks to this policy of the IRS, is a federal policy that's been in place for forever, right? Many undocumented workers are able to obtain work. So it's a predominantly immigrant workforce. And again, they brought their family and social networks from their countries. And the largest ethnic groups are Latinos, Asians, Afro-Caribbeans, and Africans. The most pressing issues has always been low pay. These are the big players. These are their market capitalization value. And as you can see, they've been growing incredibly. DoorDash with 31 billion of market cap. This is a little chronology of their advocacy effort. It started in October 2020 with a first march to City Hall. The organizers went to Times Square and expecting 300 workers. 1,000 workers showed up. The next March in April 2021, which is what you see here on these pictures, the organizer went back to Times Square expecting again 1,000 workers, but no, this time 3,000 people showed up, including a mariachi band. So in September of 2021, they were able to achieve local laws providing for the following protections: trip distance limits, which is important because they are required sometimes to go through bridges and tunnels, and that can be very dangerous, and they are not compensated appropriately. So safeguards against unfair banking fees, believe it or not, access to bathrooms, and most importantly, the minimum pay. And in June 2023, the New York City Department of Consumer Worker Protections set the minimum wage at $19.96. In July of that year, the apps sued the city, seeking to stop the minimum pay from going into effect. In December of 2023, the court just ruled against the apps and in favor of implementation of the minimum pay. So that's the local law 115. Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I tried
Okay.
to stop you and let you know that you were running out of time.
Okay, great. I'll finish up
Great.
in 1 minute. Okay, so yeah, it was a significant improvement. Right now, just recently, April 2025, it went up to 21.44. This meant giving back providing $700 million in wages since the minimum pay went into effect. So it's very, very significant. There are persisting and new challenges. The apps continue to deactivate the workers, and that means no work, no pay. And there are also loopholes in the minimum pay. But most relevant to our conversation today, since May of this year, the NYPD began issuing criminal summonses for traffic violations to app-based delivery workers, and that's a problem. They have to show up in court, and it can put a lot of people at risk of deportation.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I can talk about this in the Q&A section.
I'm so sorry, Maria. We still have one more presentation.
That's fine. Okay,
And
thank you.
thank you. I would like to welcome our last presenter, Robert Smith, who is going to present analyzing an intervention that worked, cumulative voting in Port Chester, New York. The floor is yours, Robert.
Hello, can you turn on my video?
Sure.
Thank you. That was very nice. I appreciate that. So one of the things I've enjoyed very much about this conference is that everybody is talking about stuff that they've done or that their organizations have done, because I'm a professor, and most social science analysis talks about what's wrong with the world. They don't usually talk about solutions or attempts to make things better. And so I really enjoyed everybody's applied work and everybody's policy arguments and trying to make the world better directly. So I am going to talk about some work that I have been doing with others, and that the Department of Justice.
I'm sorry, Robert. It seems that we are all in the main room, and you can continue the presentation in the main room when with everyone listening to your presentation. So you could go ahead, continue the presentation.
I thought I had done something. I thought I had hit a button and left all of you guys in the breakout room.
You're back to the main room, and then you can deliver your presentation still. Thank you.
Okay. And I will, I'm going to set a timer here so that I don't go over, because I know everybody's tired. It's like 10 o'clock at night for me right now. So Okay, so I've been doing work on something that I think is going to be very important in Portchester, in New York State. So you know that we have a federal Voting Rights Act law, and the Voting Rights Act law is supposed to protect voting minorities, Black, brown, and Asian voters, language minority, and Black voters against discrimination. I have been working since the trial in 2006-07 on research in Portchester, New York, which is the only place in New York State that has a system called cumulative voting, which I will explain in a minute. And it's super important because New York State is going to, has been debating how to pass its own Voting Rights Act law, because a significant part of the federal Voting Rights Act law has been weakened. Plus, at this point, the federal government is unlikely to be enforcing Voting Rights Act laws. And so having state level laws is going to be really important. So in my presentation, I'm going to talk about what the problems are between how the types of voting systems cause problems and can fix them. And then I'm going to talk very briefly about an example in Portchester, New York, the village of Portchester, and compare the trajectories of two of the key political leaders there that show how the place has changed. So the key problem with local voting systems is that the at-large system, which is the dominant system in New York State, there's over 1,400 places in New York State that use the at-large system, and it is over only 4 of 555 villages and 13 of 932 towns don't use the at-large system. The problem with an at-large system, it's a system with no district. So everybody is spread out in the entire town and everybody gets elected from no matter where they live. The problem is if you have a white majority in a town or place or village, and there's racially polarized voting, where white voters vote for white candidates and Black or brown voters vote for Black or brown voters, the Black and brown or Asian voters are always going to lose because they're in the minority, right? And so the normal, and if in fact a federal judge finds that there has been that protected classes of voters, Black, brown, or Asian voters, have been unable to elect candidates of their choice because of the voting system, that's a violation of the Voting Rights Act, and the judge can order that the system be changed. The normal way that this has been changed, the normal solution has been to create single-member districts, right? So in Portchester, there were 6 trustees, so they were going to create 6 districts, 2 of which would have been likely to elect a Latino or Black candidate. But instead, what they did was to choose cumulative voting. And cumulative voting is it's an interesting alternative voting system along with ranked choice voting, which we won't talk too much about tonight, although I like it better than the others. But in cumulative voting, in Portchester, for example, there were 6 trustees. So every voter had 6 votes to give, and they could plump or accumulate those votes. So if I really wanted Guillermo Martinez to win, if he was running for the trustee seat, I could give him all 6 of my votes, or I could give 3 votes to one candidate or to another. What this does is that it enables all types of minorities to elect candidates of their choice without having geographic concentration. And that's a key part of this, because the Voting Rights Act, with what's called the jingles preconditions, you cannot fix you cannot fix discrimination against Black, brown, or Asian voters if they are not compact enough geographically to form a single member district under this old standard. This is a huge mistake, I think, and both ranked choice and cumulative voting fix that. So anyway, so the story with Portchester, I'm about halfway through my time. The story with Portchester is that in 2006, the Department of Justice sued them, saying that their at-large voting district prohibited Latino voters from electing candidates of their choice. I served as an expert for the Department of Justice, talking about discrimination against Hispanic voters in the town and a history of discrimination. And I then, after I stopped that work, I then went and did research. I've since done research on all the elections that have gone there. And what's happened is that in history, Portchester's entire history before, there had never been a Latino or Black person elected. And at that point, Portchester was 45% Latino, right? And about 10 or 12% Black. And no one had ever been elected because of these at-large voting districts. When they started with cumulative voting, they got, the election yielded a good result. The first Latino person was elected and the first Black person was elected. However, the thing with cumulative voting is it expresses all types of minorities' intense preferences. So one of the local leaders described how we elected, all the minorities got elected. We got a Black trustee, a Hispanic trustee, and a bigot, because one of the, and that's not my word, that's the word of this particular leader, because one of the people who was elected and who got the most votes, Mr. Didden, was in fact had been the author of a racially polarizing pamphlet that the judge had used as a factor to rule against Portchester, which I thought was pretty interesting. So in any case, so Portchester loses their lawsuit. In 2010, they get to vote again for the first time. And then in 2000, they have to use that system from 2010 to 2016. They then, by referendum, adopt it in 2018. And I think one of the ways that we can, because I'm at 7 minutes, one of the ways we can understand how Portchester has changed, how the solution has actually worked, is to compare the trajectories of this Mr. Didden, who wrote the racially divisive pamphlet in 2007, and Luis Moreno, who was the first Latino elected to the Board of Trustees in Portchester. And so what happened is that, so Mr. Didden got the most votes of anybody immediately after when the first election came again in 2019. It was largely understood as an expression of anger at the Department of Justice forcing Portchester to change its voting system. Luis Moreno was a Peruvian immigrant, he had lived in Portchester for decades, and he was an extremely strategic and smart community leader. He joined the volunteer fire department and became a captain. He joined all kinds of community groups. He was a broker with Latino communities. He was a very shrewd politician. He ended up being the first one elected, and then he just got reelected for his third term as mayor. And his opponent in this was Bart Didden, who was the man who had written the racially divisive pamphlet. And while Mr. Didden had gotten the largest number of votes by far in the first election after cumulative voting, he did not get the largest number of voters, because he got lots of people who gave him more than one vote. In fact, lots of people gave him 6 votes. In the mayoral election that just happened in March of 2025, Luis Moreno won 62% of the vote, and Mr. Didden won 38% of the votes. It was quite a convincing victory. And I think that this is a very important, the declining trajectory of Mr. Didden's political career and the strong trajectory of Mr. Moreno shows a very, very important and significant change that was catalyzed by cumulative voting, by the Department of Justice's intervention. So in the final 40, 50 seconds, I'm going to just say one thing here regarding New York State. So New York State has discussed is trying to get to pass a voting rights law. We should not in New York State adopt the jingles preconditions that the federal government has, because it premises the relief on geographic compactness of the population. That means that if there's a Voting Rights Act violation, you can't help the people being discriminated against unless they all live in the same neighborhood, right? Which makes no sense, because ranked choice voting and cumulative voting are both solutions to that discrimination that do not require geographic concentration. Okay, I said 40 seconds, that's 40 seconds. I know everybody's running out of gas, so I will end there, and thank you for letting me run a minute over.
Thank you so much, Robert.